Good afternoon. Can you hear us? Yeah. Great. I'm Jane Alexander, and I'm with Seema Rao, and we're here a year later. We were actually here a year ago, about 2 weeks before the opening. We had a soft opening of Gallery 1 on 12/12/12, and so we thought we'd come back and tell you all we learned in this incredibly exciting, fast-paced first year. We just thought we'd give you, it's been really fun. We've gotten some Muse Awards, along with multiple design awards. We've had over 150 museums come visit, which has really been great because you get people's ideas. And we had a Museum in the Web deep dive, which was really a fabulous venue that I hope Museum of the Web does at other museums, because it was really interesting to have a product and then be able to talk about it in multiple ways. And then lots of international and national news.
Book.
Here, one.
And then apparently we are in the newest issue of Exhibitionist, and if you would like to get it, they have asked me to offer you handouts. And if you take handouts, apparently we will get a free copy of this for ourselves.
And then we won't fight over it.
That's right.
I have talked with a lot of people I see are new, and they have not even seen Gallery 1, so I just want to give a quick review. We've had a $350 million building project, and with that, we were given a gift to build a space that uses technologies to help visitors see and understand art in new ways. We wanted to make sure that technology showcases the art, and that we would invite a new set of visitors to come and explore the museum, because we found out that lots of families didn't find art museums family friendly, and also even people with lots of different degrees and very smart people were inhibited from coming to an art museum. So this was to give you the tool sets to be able to look closer and explore our collections.
And we felt that there's not one way to do it. So we tried to do this in a way that invited many visitors to learn the way they want to. And then finally, we have a very high repeat visitorship, so we wanted to surprise them.
And this broke ground in many ways at Cleveland Museum of Art, but one was this project truly was through collaboration and a combination of multiple departments and many people who were working on multiple projects. So this is 12/12/12. We had an opening for the Maltzes had given us a gift for Gallery 1, and it was sort of to honor them. But it was also, the opening was right around our busiest time of year. We're going right into the holiday season. So we didn't know, since no other museums we had to say, how does a space like this work? Do you need to limit the number of people? Is there enough Wi-Fi? We decided to have a 5-week where we would have it ticketed to come in for members and see how it went. And actually 2 weeks into the whole process, we ended up just opening up to people. We realized that people do not shove each other in front of the interactors or fight each other. They actually enjoyed it together. And it was really, actually, a lot of the concepts we thought of, seeing them play out correctly, was really fun. Also our app, if you are developing an app, you probably know that for 2 weeks that Apple closes at Christmas time. So we were patiently waiting, and on January 5th our app was launched. So all the apps in Gallery 1 were on test flight for the first test weeks. And then we opened, I'm just giving an overall video. This is about a minute and a half to show you that's Gallery 1, and there's lots been written about it and all, so we're not going to really go over all the pieces, but we wanted to give a little refresh for people who haven't seen it, and we're going to talk really about this year and meeting the goals of the interactives in the space.
So many of you probably haven't been to Gallery 1. Show of hands, how many people actually have physically been there? Some of you have been there and with me. Okay, so the vast majority of you haven't. We welcome you to come. We are a free institution, so that shouldn't be holding you back. But we have a lot of visitors who keep coming back. So just to give you a sense of the space, there are 4 constituent spaces within the footprint of Gallery 1, which is roughly equivalent to our exhibition hall. And so when we look through this, we're going to talk about many things, but this is the main entry off of our doorway. And within that, we wanted to create the beacon. And so, do you want to? Okay. So the beacon was, we had our donor, whose name is Milton Maltz, and he's part of the Maltz Family Foundation, wanted to create a visual introduction to the space that draws people in. And so we created the beacon, which I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. Can you go back? Which is the image that's on the right. There's a woman and a baby. That's a display that includes dynamic information from some of the other interactives in the space. It was right next to one of our most famous works, which is the Chuck Close portrait right there. And so this was our goal, and how did we achieve it? How well did we achieve it, if we can go back to the other slide? Well, we achieved some things. It really does draw people in. But the Chuck Close portrait, and this is sort of an awesome finding, the artwork draws people in maybe more than the technology piece. And it could be just because the technology piece is at an askew angle, but still, it's a really compelling artwork. The beacon does move and change, and something else that we learned in talking about the future is that for something that's dynamic to really be compelling, it has to actually feel very dynamic. And so that we're thinking about adding more dynamic content to that.
Really making it like a dashboard for the museum, sort of representing what's going on.
So to keep going, we have a family space that we call Studio Play. And it's a space that has both high-touch and high-tech interactives, and we're finding it's an incredibly busy space. Our goal was to create a space that made families feel welcome at the museum, and we'd done a lot of audience evaluation, and families said they weren't feeling welcome. So within the space, we have a lot of non-technology interactives, which have gotten great usage, but we also have 2 technology interactives. One of them was matching and sorting, and that is a game where young children are encouraged to reinforce their incipient visual and verbal literacy. And so they match words to images. And that has been very successful. I think it was an incredibly grueling game to create. But people of all ages like it. And it doesn't beat you over the head that you're learning to read or remembering how to read. It's just sort of fun to play. Along with that, we have a game that's called Line and Shape, and we've had an art program in our institution since our opening in 1916. We have one of the oldest art class programs in the United States. And so we wanted to create an interactive that invites children or asks children to realize that they're part of a continuum of art making, and that what the lines that they make could be on the way to being Picasso or to being something else in our collection. And so this was a way that kids could do that. Something that we found, actually, is that people of all ages enjoy it because it's a visual way to sort through our collection. And that much of art museums, we actually, while a visual institution, much of the information access is through textual means. And so this is a way that people can actually do it through a visual, sort of almost, it's amazing. It's like a mesmerizing visual means of sorting through information.
And then when you go through the galleries, you truly do see the painting with the word you heard, or see the image you drew and get excited about
Absolutely.
the object.
So you can see, I'm sorry that we didn't bring a floor plan, I sort of wished we had, but if you download our app, after hearing this presentation, you can see our floor plan. But Studio Play is a space that's back there. It has it's glassed in so families can see it, so they're not sort of stocked away somewhere. And then the families can see the people who are playing in the larger space, and we sort of by default call it Gallery 1. It is a space that includes objects from our permanent collection. There are 14 groupings of artworks. They include many of our masterworks. You're seeing a Rodin right there, an African work by a known artist, and then a Japanese work. And so the lenses, there's 14 groupings and 6 standalone lenses where people can access information, but also play to learn. And there's 2 of the lenses. And our goal really was that everybody learns differently, and we wanted to create multiple points of access. I said we were a high repeat visitorship institution, and so we wanted people to find something new each time they come. And so we tried to make these very deep. The thing that was really challenging is, so if you want to serve many people or almost everybody, it's very hard. And some of them is very hard in terms of tone and written text, but some of it is physical. So Jane and I use ourselves as physical examples very often. I am like the shortest person on the team, and she is on the taller side. I didn't want to call her out. But for some of the interactives, we have a Kinect camera. How do we make sure that that's accessible for somebody who's 4 years old, and then somebody who is very, very tall? And we've had some real challenges. You know, we've made kids cry, literally, because the camera cannot see them. But on the other side, we've had some real successes because we've encouraged new behaviors. So kids are really, playing with the interactives and then inviting their parents to look at the art. One of the things that we found in terms of new behaviors is people who came in wanting to look at the technology are beginning to look at the art. People came in wanting to look at the art are starting to look at the technology. And so we're creating sort of this crossover culture. I was in another session just at the 1:30 slot, and we have one problem we've also had is that social media does continue to be a challenge. We're trying to figure out how to do it without having to have you sign in to an interactive. And it has been challenging, and we want to harness that because it's so exciting, but it's also been incredibly challenging. So then the third constituent space in Gallery 1 is the collection lounge, and you can see that there's the collection wall, and if we can go back 2 images, I'm sorry. It's a 40-foot interactive wall, and Jane will talk about it more. But in it, we had a number of goals. It's a large space, and it's a space that's visible off of our atrium. So it's the counterpoint, it's the bookend to the beacon. And so in it, we wanted to encourage people to really visualize the breadth of our collection. We have 45,000 objects. We have 14 collecting areas. We wanted them to get excited about what they see and find new things to be excited about. We wanted them to be able to take that with them and leave Gallery 1, which is a little bit set off from the rest of the permanent collection galleries, and walk into those galleries and find the thing that they were so excited about. There was definitely some challenges with this, and one of them was cover flow is a term that we use. We have some curated views. So sometimes you see the whole collection on view plus a few additional works. We are in the middle of opening new galleries, so that affects some of this. And then there's also some curated views, like objects by color or circle. And so as we were doing that, the development took months because there were some coding problems. And it actually took us months to try to figure it out because we had to have enough users to really get a sense of some of the things that were occurring with favoriting and other things like that.
Actually, one of the things, when we opened all the interactives, I mean, I've been on small projects, but all the interactives except for the app, not being at the App Store, but it was in test flight, and so people thought it was working. But everything really worked, and we brought things up in the back end that sometimes we were faking to work. But one of the things was the collection wall. When you touch an object, it dynamically pulls from our back end systems. And so you can search by department, or by medium, or by year, or by gallery. And this way you can start in ancient architecture and end up in contemporary photography. And we had worked with the developers, and we thought we had the same idea of how it would work. And it wasn't until months later that we realized the same objects kept getting favorited, and the way the favoriting, instead of randomizing when a cover flow from our back end, it was taking the most favorited objects. So then it was a self-fulfilling prophecy that the same objects kept coming up. But that takes like 4 months of people doing it a lot to say, wait, I'm seeing the same objects in all these cover flows. And then, of course, once we noticed that, we had to go back in and change it. But those are things that you don't know until you kind of are down the road. So here, I just wanted to go through this quickly. This was a big thing. We've learned a lot this year. Since we have Gallery 1 is open daily, regular museum hours upon request for special events. And we have a full-time technician in the space at all times because we wanted to, since it is a gallery, we did not want things to look broken. We didn't want to have the guards call someone because something was down. But we also realized because there's so much going on that you need a person to be able to help you with the technology and also explain how to use it if it's your first time. So we have a server room for the is embedded right in Gallery 1, as you can see. The hardware and the software are reset on an automatic schedule, but they can be reset manually by the Gallery 1 technician. That's Terry, one of our technicians. And we also, additionally, Gallery 1 support technicians can manage interactives via Log Me In. And I can change something from home. Anybody who's on the staff gets a notice when something's down, and you can log in and fix it right away. Log Me In provides flexibility by allowing technicians to access the server via multiple platforms. We also all have it on our phones. And then Gallery 1 support technicians, they also clean all the touch screens as soon as they come in the morning, and then also at the end of the day, every time someone returns an iPad, everything is cleaned down. We also, in the middle of the day, if you have a time, we go around again so that everything really stays clean. It doesn't look dirty, it doesn't look used, because you're in an art gallery and we want everything sparkling. That's lens interact, cleaning all the things. And then Gallery 1 support technician manages rental and return of iPads. So we only require a driver's license. We went through probably 500 hours of how are we going to rent an iPad discussions. And I'm gonna save you all from that and say, make it as easy as possible and then add more. And we were going to have security codes and tracking things and all this stuff. And in the end, we just asked for people's license. We have yet today have one stolen from us. And we thought once it's a problem, we'll relook at it again. But I say start simple.
We talked about ninjas.
And then we have it automatically scans the iPad, so it's in the tracking system that talks to our other backend systems. We have all our systems talk to each other so that we are also, our development team knows who's renting an iPad, who's coming into Gallery 1 there. And this talks about our central table that has been created to do that. We also provide an RFID tag if you bring your own iPad. And this way you're able to save favorites to your own iPad, and it's yours for free. We offer it for free right now, but it is one thing we underestimated how many people would bring their own iPads. We have never come close to renting out all our iPads, but we have run out of RFIDs, and we have probably, I would say we're probably up to 2,000 RFIDs. Actually, I would say it's 2,500 RFIDs that we've given out to date. And it's a sticker that stays with them, so you get it one time. The Gallery 1 technician instructs visitors on how ArtLens interacts with the collection wall, and we really do. People go and they figure it out themselves, but then they want some more feedback, they like some information, and because you can make your own tours, or you can take tours that we already have, people usually like a little quick overview and how to use the augmented reality part of the iPad. That's showing the RFID that comes with the rented one. And then afterwards, they go off to explore our galleries with their new favorites. And through our Wi-Fi wayfinding in the ArtLens, they're able to go find the objects they want. And our technicians are always happy, as you can see.
So it might be transparent from the way that we're doing this presentation. We said that this was a program that involved everybody's input. Jane's role is really about the technology, and mine was about education, choosing the works that were in the space, deciding on the content that would go into those works, working on studio play. There was many other people who participated in this. I do want to say that the photographer who took all these pictures happens to be here too, Howard Agresti. But one of the things that once the space was open is that a lot of us think about how can we use the space beyond what's physically there. And so education has focused very much on visitor experience and ways that you can broaden the use of the space. And so staff has been using Gallery 1 as a learning laboratory. And we do this for groups from elementary school, so like third grade, all the way through college. And so we've had a great sort of success in that. We also have storytime experiences. We're working on senior programming. Because what we found, I think both of us, she talked about a technician, is that the space and the technology has not negated people. It's actually proved that we need more people in the space. People want to have someone there. They want something beyond just that space. Sometimes they come, and Jane and I were talking as we're preparing this, they come the first time, they bring back their friends. They think of it as a social experience. And so we have a lot of programming that does that, but we also have, and if you'll change, we also have a special volunteer corps that is in the space, and we call them gallery hosts. The woman who is in charge of that program, Patty Edmondson, was very purposeful in her choice of the name for that title. A host is somebody who welcomes you there. It is not a docent, and it's not a guide in that way. They're not leading. They're just there to have these conversations with people. And they've been really, really helpful. Families like having them, because then they have someone, if they have a question, they have someone who could, just help out. And then the hosts also have the role of making sure that things are clean. Like many hostesses have to do, so that they feel like it is a place, as Jane said, that is sparkling. These are little tents, so we're not talking too much about the physical space of studio play, but we have a lot of little nooks and crannies. We have a lot of secrets and surprises, not just in the technology, but also in the physical space.
So the other really important thing to building Gallery 1, and it is, and we have proven that it's been really successful, is that we have a sustainable design and process. I just thought I threw these numbers up. People always ask me. When we were doing the budget last year, we now have 100K of new operating in fact, I would say it's probably now at 135K, because we have a full-time staff person added to Gallery 1, because there's lots of events that people actually want a Gallery 1 open for. Our Wi-Fi solution, which we talked about last year, which is in the Museum and the Web's paper, was a hosted solution, because we couldn't go back into our newly painted galleries and add new APs. We have now brought that hosted solution in-house, so within a year and a half that will have paid for itself, and so that's a great savings, because at one point that was going to be $70,000 a year that we just added to our budget. We also, our maintenance contracts, we work with Zenus, who helped us do the AV integrator. We then had to up the quality in that the response time couldn't be within the next 2 working days. We need to know if there's something really down that we can't fix, that we have it within that end of that day. So that costs more, and that increases your maintenance time.
I mean, visitors, we've set a sort of sense of visitor expectation, and so we have to continue to meet it. We just can't have any perception that we're broken, because people know that we work.
And it's also it's great, because when you walk in, it's there, and off the atrium, it's there, but you can always see it. And so it's not good to be down at any point. And actually, I have to say, Interactive Life, we have had a fantastic year. I mean, it really was built solid. And then there's printing cost, and
so the thing about these costs is that they're not just for one part of our department. It's not just IT. Education has had to increase our staffing to manage this. Every institution, collections management, security, photography. So there's all the staffing costs, but then there's all these incidentals. People want. We print printed tours that take you out of Gallery 1. People take them like they're going out of style. And so you have all these new printing costs. It's amazing the way that money disappears. Volunteers, you have to pay for their parking. So when you're thinking about costs, think really broadly.
Right, and also it was an interactive space, so we discussed a lot about having no language, or no, we don't need a brochure, but it ended up people were so excited about, they really wanted a brochure that explained how it worked, or where did this come from, and so we ended up adding that too, because as you see, the technician has enough to do, and people were just asking long-winded questions, and so this is a way to sort of help that visitor get more information. So these were the rules, as I said, that on-site within 45 minutes, all the technologies had to be established within what we're using in our back-end systems for everything else. We're a Windows-based museum, so when designing all the interactives, I made sure that continued. And we also made these sort of fake, so for the wall, if when we have had times where the touch isn't working, we have this it looks like the wall's working. We have another face that comes up that it keeps changing between views. You just can't save objects, and that way there's still this sense of you can view it as an artwork. The other thing is the collection wall, which Seema pointed out. One of the reasons we all pulled from our back end systems is that our entire collection with the opening of the museum is almost completely digitized. And to taking advantage of that, nothing goes on view without Howard and his group photographing it. So this was a way to really use something dynamically, so when it goes on view or goes on loan or is accessioned or deaccessioned, it's dynamically shown on the wall in the art lens. And this is just showing the modular system. Each one of those, it is a micro tile. There's a projector behind each one, and that if there's a scratch or anything on the panel, we can just pull it off like this. And as you can see, it's just a projector, and you can replace it that way. And we do have parts. We haven't had to replace any parts yet. We almost had to replace a part in Studio Play, but we fixed it. So
It's true.
So we're going to jump into, I just want to talk about Art Lens quickly, what it is, because we looked at it closely, and we had lots of ideas during the year on what we wanted to do for immediate fixes. And one of them was add more analytic design to the back end to understand analytics more. And the other was to, we thought Art Lens, because it does so much, we wanted it to be a little bit more friendly user, intuitive to the average user. But we also wanted a smartphone version, because that having an iPhone and an Android phone version seemed to be the most requested. When is this happening? So we have put our money in for this year to do that first. And so we looked closely at what is Art Lens so that we could decide how did we want to make the phone a little bit different.
So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, Gallery 1 is the physical space that is at the front door of the museum. And then Art Lens is the app, and we have a lot of global users who use it on their iPads in Vietnam or wherever they are. But it also connects to interpretation across the museum's collection. So it does interpret every work that's in Gallery 1, so the 61 objects that are there, plus many of the works that are in the rest of our permanent collection galleries throughout our building.
So what is Art Lens? It's location awareness recommendation. So as you're walking through a gallery, it will pop up and it will show you objects that have interpretation. It's interpretive content that has videos, hotspots, and regular label text and suggestions to related artworks and tours that are made by the museum and multimedia tours.
And hotspots are ways that we call out things on the work.
So this is contextual hotspots in which used by just holding up the iPad, it will scan the artwork and it pops up, and then you can select a box with it's all question formatted, and then you can get more information that way. And then guided tours, and then personalization, as you saw. As you see something on the wall that you like, you can favorite it, and it goes into your favorite column, and then you can make your own tour or send it out to friends or go see that object by itself. So when developing Art Lens, as we said, it was we looked at the type of audiences that came to the museum, and we found there are people that come and they say, I'm here for today. What should I see? What order should I see them in? We found that there were people who came and they said, I only really like contemporary art. What should I see? And what should I do, and what should I know about them? And then there are the people who said, I just like to wander, but when I see something I like, I want to get information quickly. And that's what we tried to address in Art Lens.
And I remind you, think of yourselves, sometimes you could be any one of those people. And so we knew that people might take those functions at any time in their experience at the museum over a year.
And even while being on a guided tour, you could jump off and just start wandering around and using the scannability of the app. So when we had another new group to do the smartphone, we added more departments. We added conservation and collections to the team, and we looked at
And library.
And we looked at that. We found that we think that audio guides are perceived as isolating. That most of our visitors multitask their experiences, but no matter what they're doing, even if they're coming to the atrium or having just to see our new cafe or see the interactives, they want to leave knowing something about art. There still is this real focus on, I want to know something about art before I leave. We also learned that we have all these great videos on Art Lens, but a lot of people select them and then save them for later. We don't know yet if they're actually watching them later, but they have the intention, as we all do with lots of things that we save to read for later. We found that people want to share their experiences intimately, and that we love taking photos. And we see, I can't think of going through the space where I don't see people taking a photo of something. And then people love sharing them in multiple ways. We discussed that we needed to keep it simple for people to be able to use it. One of the problems with ArtLens is it's a little too complex. And make it very task-oriented. Show it easily how to browse, how to collect, and how to keep something. So we got our group together and we did a lot of random ideas, and we did then put in infinity diagramming, and that's our team doing that. And we had the task of designing a mobile application that will offer a new level of user engagement, and it will do it amazingly well. So we are in the middle of our beta version for iPhone, which will be in 2014. That's a little glimpse of the the beta version. We added a couple of things to it, like search, even though the wall is really about browsing and seeing our collection in multiple different ways and not just finding the 6 objects that you love the most in the museum. We still found that on the iPad or on the phone, people want to search for an object, so we've added that functionality.
It kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, that we're finding that so many of our visitors come to a visual institution, but they do textual searching in their lives. And so they really need that. And if they don't, they feel a little uncomfortable. So we want to be able to cater to both of those desires.
Another thing we've been looking closely is scanning on this size, the size screen of a phone compared to a iPad is big difference. So how do you lay out the hotspots? How do you make it still that users can see it easily and they know what we're talking about? So we've looked at all those kind of things, and we're looking forward to the launch in early January. The last one quick thing that I wanted to talk about was the wayfinding that is instrumental to making everything work. It's become detrimental, but
This talk is taking a turn. Sorry,
so
bad pun.
I just thought, since a lot of people asked me about this, I wanted to, since we had a building project, it was great because we were able to sort of jump in and add things and look at how we wanted to change our infrastructure. The other problem is the buildings had already been almost halfway open before we got into implementing this project. So there was no intention to have wireless Wi-Fi in every single gallery, which we needed for this project. So we, as I said, we determined where we needed to put more APs, and in the end, we had to come up with a new solution because that wasn't feasible. And so we worked with Amazon, which is a cloud-based location service. They were fabulous. They sometimes if you get just people have the skill set but they're not too big, they worked with our developers to really, and they made adjustments to their own system to make our system work better. And they just fit, you can see they just fit in those little canisters. So it worked with our design team that didn't want to see these at all. And then, as I said, they were really great that they worked with us this August. I was very happy that we've moved the whole system into it's not a hosted solution anymore. We are managing it from in-house. And we are opening our last galleries this December, and we're adding the last part of Wi-Fi, and then we should be done. But we did, there were definite issues, like even with the iOS upgrade, planning for the future and what that means. That changed a lot of stuff, and you have to constantly, I would say, put in your budget that you're going to be tweaking your Wi-Fi for the rest of this, continuing on as things change. So don't just assume that it's in and it's working, that it's done. So as I said, we're still not quite enough. We're increasing the usage and volume due to ArtLens, in addition to regular visitors on their own devices. We're going to do we've now to a centrally managed controller-based wireless network, which will help with falling off the network, as happens sometimes on the iPads. And then this is all on the slides. I'll let you read if you're that much interested. But we're constantly looking at making it better and tighter, and that so you really are going from each gallery. It pops up in the exact gallery you're in. And again, the biggest challenge though is we still have this 1916 building that's really hard to work with, and it also has very small spaces with lots of tiny objects. So it's still a matter of thinking how we can make this work better.
So to talk about, I know that one of the things we promised was to talk a little bit about evaluation. And we're going to talk about the process, and it's actually been a very, very long process. So if we can switch the slide, thank you. One of the things that we did when we started thinking about Gallery 1, and actually before it was even Gallery 1, when the space was earmarked, we started doing an audience evaluation. And we did a variety of kinds of audience evaluation. We did observations in our galleries to see how people were really using our galleries, if they were looking at the art, if they were looking at the labels. We did focus groups with people of all ages and also with a number of stakeholders, including the director and board of trustees. We tried to really compile a lot of information before we even started. And then after that, we did a number of different small evaluatory processes, like card sorts about ideas. We call guerrilla evaluation. So if you happen to have, in the last 10 years, been at the Cleveland Museum of Art, I might have accosted you and asked you what you were interested in. We went to libraries. Our donor actually, because the Maltz Family Foundation, or Mr. Maltz himself, had been very involved in the Spy Museum. He apparently went to the National Mall, his team, and asked people. So we went to libraries and sporting events and all sorts of things. That began a very long process of evaluation. And I promise you, if you have not participated in evaluation, it takes longer than you would think. And so that is why I can tell you how we are doing what we're doing. I can't tell you what we know about it. And it's important, it's important because, having been in a lot of evaluation, you start and you get the feedback and you read the first few visitor observations and you think one thing, and the first 4 are the same. You're like, I know what this is going to be. And then the next 35 are something different. And so for that reason, we had some preliminary stuff we were going to give you, and then we have a house research team actually said, wait, because we're finding new things. And so I can tell you how we did it, and we can talk, if you have questions at the end about how we did it. And then at AAM, you can hear what we found out. Because we actually don't even completely know. We know we're waiting to hear the feedback ourselves. We're on bated breath. But some of the things that we did do is literature review. We wanted to make sure we knew what other people were doing. Literature review in terms of how spaces are used. That was an important part of our process in planning it. We had a very iterative process. So for the line interactive, we had hundreds of school children and museum art class children draw. So we could think about what their drawings were, digitally draw, and then we used that as part of the process. We tested matching repeatedly. We just tested these things over and over and over, and I can't stress enough, we tested it on site with our visitors, because your visitors will be different than other people's visitors. Your city might be different. Our developers were in different places. We did a lot of different user testing. So we tried where their hands were going to think about where the home button went. In terms of more formal evaluation, we did a variety of different means of trying to understand it. So we did observations, we did surveys, we did interviews, and then we did full-on audience panels with certain groups. The thing about it is that, we knew that there was different needs to understand each of these tools, and that people who are using ArtLens are a global audience, and so we have to use analytics to understand that. So you can see the complexity of the problem and why it's taking us until January of 2014. We've, for example, videotaped people, and so we're transcribing all of these hours, hundreds of hours of videotapes. The people who are doing the transcription, I see them sometimes, their eyes are crossed. I mean, they're so exhausted. So it's an incredibly complex process.
And
Yeah.
because marketing needs it, the evaluations for one reason, education needs it for something else, technology and interpretation needs it for another reason. So making sure, and there's 11 interactives and all, and really understanding all that in this new space is we have a lot of anecdotal. We've all worked in the space a lot. By having 150 museums come, it's been great because I go down there a lot more than I would, and I catch things and I go upstairs and make changes. And I'm sure you've been on the tour with me. I'm like, oh, someone take a photo of that and send it to me because I see something that's not quite right. And so that's been good. But putting all this together so the whole museum can use it has become a much more complex project. So as Seema said, it'll be presented in May.
That's right. The thing that's really important for us, to go back to that slide, is that we didn't want to use just one process. And I said that already, but I want to reiterate that when you have a problem as complex as ours, to really get a picture of how visitors are using and understanding the space, you have to use a variety of approaches. I really suggest, if you've done audience evaluation, or if you hope to do research with your audience, and I hope that you are, that you don't try, you get kind of stuck. We went through a phase where we were doing a lot of card sorts. And you will end up finding yourself siloing your questions. So you want to make sure that you try a variety of approaches so that you yourself aren't sort of stagnating or maybe skewing the research in the wrong way. The other thing I would reiterate what sort of Jane said, audience evaluation is one tool, and as museum professionals, we really have a number of tools that we have to combine when we make a decision. So we're going to use this audience evaluation, we're going to use our professional opinion, having been in the space. We're going to use anecdotal experiences from our volunteers who are our eyes when there's no staff there. We're going to think about which things broke, the actual physical damage that happens in blocks. Okay, well, they chew up the blocks for sure. There's so many tools that you will use when you make your decisions. And one of our good evidence of a tool that we've used to make our decision is that when you get to scan works of art, so those of you, again, I can't encourage you enough to download ArtLens, so this talk makes even more sense to you. You can scan works of art, but not all works of art are scannable. Most 2D works of art are scannable, but not all. Most 3D works of art are not scannable, but some are. So that's an incredibly complex message to try to communicate to a visitor, especially when you're not physically there. We were doing it through graphics. So if we had many hours of meetings about how to check out iPads, we had double that many hours of meetings to think about what kind of signage and what kind of logos we would use to try to communicate that complicated message. And so one of the things that we found is that wayfinding and wall labels, we actually put them up. We put them up on Gallery 1. We were lucky because we have a physical footprint. And we were able to observe how people were doing it. And we actually went through many iterations of those. And I'm happy to say I think we found a solution that's quite usable.
Fifth iteration.
It's the person who's in charge of the content for the app said it's the 5th iteration right now. The other thing that we found is that, the thing for me about planning installations is that it's hard when you're on a footprint and you're looking at a map to completely imagine how the space will be physically. And so we installed a work that's actually very beloved in the Cleveland Museum of Art, Richard Long's Cornwall Circle. And if anybody knows his works, those are these really amazing, austere installations of rocks. And so visitors loved it, and actually it was an interesting work in that you have to walk around it to appreciate it. We had a video of the installation. It was the #1 video in the app. It was, really loved, except for that it was basically in the wrong place, because it was right next to the most popular interactive, and the one that uses large motor skills.
The posing game.
And
people were falling into it.
And so we had major challenges. It actually had been installed in other spaces that were much more signaled as gallery spaces. And the thing that you will find when you open any kind of space that's different than the rest of your galleries is that you won't know what to expect. And so we had set up this space where, in the Cleveland Museum of Art, you do not touch art. Except for you do touch the ones that are in the children's space that don't really look like art, but kind of have art on it. And you get to touch in touch screens. They do things. Except for the beacon, you touch it and it doesn't do anything. It's actually a display. And so we found ourselves having to negotiate some of these things that we didn't imagine. And I think we've negotiated them well. We put in a new work of art there, new to our collection, Fred Wilson. And it does a lot of the same things, which is that we wanted an artwork that interacted with people. And so it draws shadows onto people, basically. It's a huge chandelier.
But it just also says in the process, like the whole collaboration, even when installing the art, there's another piece where we have a tempera that they moved it from the original plan, and the technology and interactive people weren't at that meeting, and thus the lens, which is you're supposed to be able to swipe over and still see it, had been moved behind it, because people, that's why it really takes the whole team to sort of point out what each move means. And so I think we learned that as a great example. And then we moved it back. And so since we have no analytics, Steve is going to give you some quick pick numbers, but I think you can go through quickly.
So I'm supposed to talk fast. I think you can read some of the numbers here. But we have actually, since we've been open, which was one of our busiest days institutionally is MLK Day. We're traditionally closed on Mondays, but we're open on that day. And it's the one day a year some of our underserved populations come to the museum. They think that there's a misconception that we cost money. And so we get sometimes up to 5,000 people who walk in the door, who will not walk in again for one more year. And so starting with that day until now, we've had 96,000 visitors.
Wait, I'm sorry. This is from April, I didn't put, oops.
Eek.
This is from April to date.
Look at, she's totally
Missing.
like setting me up.
So that's even more people.
So
plus
even
the
more
5,000.
people. We've had more than 9,000 Artland's apps downloaded. Hopefully we'll have like 9,100 and at least 71 after all of you download it. How many images the visitors, they each favorite about 5 images. And I think that's an interesting average. That means that somebody is favoring a whole lot of them, because 5 is pretty good for one single session. One of our interesting things for staff is that we've been really struck by how many people really enjoy the interactives in the lenses. Each of the 6 lenses have different interactives in it. And so one of them, strike a pose, you get to stand like sculptures. You get to understand what it feels like to stand in the pose of the person who's being depicted. You can make a face and understand the expressions. So you can it matches your expression to artworks in our collection. You can make your own Chinese porcelain vase and see how much it's worth. Along with that, visitors are encouraged in our app to make tours. And we've found that people of all ages really enjoy this feature, because then it's a way that they can kind of lead people on their favorites. School teachers also really love this feature. And then the most favorited artwork right now is Monet's Water Lilies. It's not totally surprising to us institutionally, because it's one of our absolute favorites. It's one of our most well-known works. I will tell you that, many of us, Jennifer Fuller, who's sitting in the front, Jane and I, we get to hear from the research team which artworks are favorited. And there's something really amazing about the collective consciousness, because there's, and I don't say this in a pejorative way, there's no surprises. Some things some of them are like Monet's Water Lilies, but then we have other things that are loved by our institution but are not made by famous artworks, famous artists. We have a work called Gray and Gold, which is by a basically unknown artist whose last name is Cox, and it has always been our favorite. And that sort of re-shows up on our app, and it's kind of this really encouraging thing that people love things in technology and in real life at the info desk. They keep coming back. It's really interesting undercurrents.
So why we know we have to be done with most of our evaluations by January is that we have to begin the refresh process, Gallery 1 2.0, in January, to be able to have a new refresh in January 2016. And to do this, there is a team composed from a back end implementing a museum-wide digital strategy. As I said, the technology team has done a sort of infrastructure digital strategy, but really getting the whole museum on board. So there's a team of the Director of Education, Collections, Exhibitions, Marketing, Libraries, and Technology. And we're putting together a plan to make sure that it implements it full-wide for the museum. The other thing that why we have a deadline of January 2016 no matter what is because of the artworks.
So we have the curators of the museum have been incredibly generous. We pulled works out of our permanent collection galleries, including our Picasso and our Rodin, and but we've promised them that we would actually give them back. And I did recently go and ask every one of them if they wanted them back, and all of them wanted them back. So we have really started thinking about what's the next one. And this is sort of an interesting thing about museums. Visitors expect it to change. You know, we've set up a culture where we are changing things, and we can't break that habit. And so we are evaluating how we're going to do that. What's the best way to do it? And one of the things we've thought about is that we will start by doing some small refreshes, and then go with the complete overhaul in January 2016.
And for the January 2016, we're still going to plan and design through collaboration, but as I said, add a couple more departments to the team that are really valuable in constructing such a front end space that everyone walks through when they come to the museum, or is possibly to walk through. And the other thing is, we'll still look at some small things like, and do some, move some, add some more content, change videos around, make some tweaks to the beacon, look at the line and shape, which is a white background instead of a black background. We show the art shows off better on the black background. Look at those things. Those are small tweaks. But then that main space with the lenses, we're really going to look at, like, do we want to continue with that type of interactive? Did that really work? And we're planning on, that's where we're going to still take, risk and use technology in new ways to help the visitor really explore art. And hopefully we've learned enough to really start implementing and trying something new, because we want to continue it to be a test bed for the future of how museums use technology to help people understand and view art.
And I think, for a lot of us institutionally, this is the evaluation was funded in part by a very generous grant from from IMLS, and so for them we think of this as really a summative evaluation, but for us institutionally we're thinking of this as front end. Never whenever you launch anything, don't think it's finished, as Jane said. Think of it as the beginning, because then it keeps you excited about trying something new. Because the one thing that we always struggle with is we don't want our staff to feel like they're stagnating or that they're burned out. And so giving them something to be excited about in the future is extremely important.
And then we just want to end and open it up to some questions. But we have this big party every year on solstice, and we actually had the collection wall streaming across the back, and it was just a big part of this party and a way to really, congratulate Cleveland Museum of Art on its opening and technology driven. And it was just a really exciting experience I wanted to share. So that's it.
So we turned through a lot, and I know that for some of you it might be a little out of context if you maybe weren't completely familiar with the space, but we left enough time to encourage questions or conversation. Yes?
Sneak, two questions into one here.
All right,
So,
do it.
one is, what was the overall capital technology costs for this project?
That question is asked, and it's not like, it's asked all the time. And we always say there was a $10 million gift, but obviously in a gift, it's not all, it's spent for many different aspects. And the other thing is, like, offline, I sometimes will give you sort of what we spent, but it's actually not a fair number, because I did a design to build with both our media interactive designer, our wayfinding developer, and our AV integrator, who all were working at 25 cents an hour with the amount of hours and stuff that this took in the design. But they all knew it was a great project, because collaborative-wise, they were all going towards something that they thought was good. So the numbers aren't quite accurate. I can give you hardware costs and stuff, but it's. But I will say it's a lot less than $10 million. It's but if you were going to go build it now, I'm not sure if it would be reflective.
And I guess the second part of that is how much, and I realize there's a lot of difference here, how much of the software development was done in-house as opposed to contracted?
So all the application for the interactives was done by local projects, but it all ties in directly to our back-end system. So we had actually Piction, who we work with, who's our digital asset management system, designed the CMS that's on top of it pulled from the digital asset management system that pulls from our catalog collection management system. So that, as I said, everything be kept dynamically. That was done, and then our whole team in-house, all the different back-end systems that connect to that, we do. And we're still doing, in fact, we're doing an upgrade to Piction, so that stuff is even done. We can do that in a way that's even simpler and can get more information out in better ways. So, but the actual development of the games and the interactives you see was done by local project. But at the design, but just one more thing, that team was made the concepts, forced the technology. We did the in-house test, we did prototyping and testing, and we did the the tagging for all the words and stuff in the back, and we did that all in-house, so that we can change it all the time.
Oh yes, for hours and hours and hours. If you wanted to just talk about time cost there, tagging was a lot. How about over here, and then we'll go back over there.
So I'm just curious, anecdotally, I understand you're doing a much more sophisticated scientific evaluation.
Yes.
But anecdotally, could you tell us 2 or 3 things that you think are like dynamite successful, and if you could only do 2 or 3 things, this would be the things I'd be thinking about. And also 2 or 3 things that maybe you were surprised to find out you thought were going to be real gangbusters, but nobody pays any attention to them.
Should I go first? 'Cause I don't know if we even agree.
Go ahead, I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
I think we agree on the last one.
Okay, go. Somebody go. Anybody
All
go.
right, Jennifer's going to take the last question. I personally think that, but it's hard because I fought for it, because we weren't going to be doing a micro-tile collection wall. I think the collection wall is hugely successful. I think it democratizes our collection. I think it shows things that people have never seen. I think people, I can't tell you, I've now 3 times had a mom and a child walk in and the child say, oh, art museums aren't boring, or I love that, and it looks like a commercial, but it's really happening. And so that, and I actually, every time I go down there, I don't get tired of seeing the art in different ways. So, and the potential of what that can be and where we can go with that seems really open. So I think that constantly we get positive, and that and it was implemented really successfully, and it works, fairly well for something that complex.
I think a lot of the methodologies of the lenses are very successful. So, one thing that I think both of us have talked about is that we're not tied to any technology, that we have to be sort of open in the future. But I think that the idea that different people can get different things out of it have been very successful. Jane and I were talking earlier about there's a feature in it where it shows the artwork in original context. And that when you use, picture's really worth 1,000 words, and the space really talks to that sensibility in humanity. And that play is really powerful is another thing that I would say about the space that has really worked. And everyone's idea of play is different. And so we've done many different things. So the variety has been incredibly successful. And then what was the negative?
I was going to say, before the negative, I would even answer the question of what works really well that I was a little surprised of, or things that one was the context. I was in those meetings and I was like, this is taking forever, and they are so successful and they're so helpful. Within 3 seconds you have information, date, visual picture, and of this object, and it makes you want to know more. And then something like the matching sorting, we had 4 interactives in studio play, and we had to select 2, and we had a vote and went back and forth. And I really, really wanted line and shape. I fought for it, and I really, really didn't want matching sorting. So I got sort of my tops, and matching sorting is so successful. It's very simple. I think I didn't like it because it was a very simple game, it's felt like, but people with no kids around play that game forever. And it really does work. I walk through the galleries and I hear myself saying umbrella, dog, and
there's kids with her, of course. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me because we're in the space all the time and have to really think about what doesn't work. I think there's parts of things that don't work. So it is really challenging that the game that is the one that is large motor skills, which is something that little kids would want to do, is not accessible to them. And I think that is challenging. I have talked to people, this was I was in a session earlier about accessibility. There are people who that we have certain accessibility issues that's challenging, and that we can improve on that. So those are kind of things.
The beacon, we put the least amount
we all agree.
It's a 6-minute loop. It has it's very few dynamic features, but we knew time-wise that we just wanted something that said, this is a different space, there's technology in it, and it just sort of is a welcome thing, but we could really exploit that tool in a much better way, and it was the least amount of, it's what we thought it would be, but it's not, no one's, talks about it like, wow, Although people do stand. I know so I'll let Jennifer talk about what is the part that
The thing that didn't work as well as we thought it would.
Yeah.
I would say social media in our lens.
Yeah.
So
I would say we all,
I think
let me just repeat it so everyone can hear. So Jennifer Foley, who's the director of interpretation at the Cleveland Museum of Art, said that social media, which is true, social media has been incredibly challenging for us. And I was at the presentation at 1:30 with MCA Australia, who's in the back. But that social media can be really challenging institutionally, and I think it's because we were asking people to share our artworks, which maybe they don't want to share it the way we want to. And so that has been actually very challenging, it's true. So over there.
Oh, I just wanted to know, I know that the analytics are not ready yet, but I'm wondering how analytics factored into your process. Like, how often did you look at them as you were doing your visitor evaluation? And then you had a slide that said that refining the analytics and adding different tags. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit more about what you're tracking and kind of what information you're getting and how that's changed how you do this?
So the evaluation team that's in charge of sort of heading that out is not us, but I have access to all it, and so does Jennifer. And I constantly look at the analytics a lot when I was curious. Mostly I was looking at them because I was looking at what's not working, like our line and shaped, it seemed like the same 20 objects kept coming up, and I know there's 4,000, so, I go and look at things sometimes like that, so I use like that to make fixes or to talk to the developer about what's going on here. So that's how I use it to keep, this first year, it's like everyone comes in, it really does feel like it's working and all, but we all know when you go down there, like, that's not quite. So and we've all looked at reports. I have to say, there's so many projects going on with the opening that I know I want different tags and areas and how we can look at the analytics that I'm not getting. And there's certain things we can't get because we didn't build it into the, especially like the wall, certain things we would like to record, we didn't build it in. So I'm going to definitely tell you when you build your, it's something you're not thinking about. And they'll say, analytics are there, but really think about what are you going to hope to get out of this, and because it costs a lot more money to go back and do that, or to get more money to do that. So
And think as broadly about what you want, because you're not going to know what you want, which is an awful thing to say. I'm like, yeah, try to come up with something you can't, look for a unicorn or something. But it's really hard. I mean, for me, the analytics, we've looked at it, and we've had, looked at it repeatedly. And it's kind of like that thing, if your, like, kennel has a dog cam, or your preschool has a nanny has a cam where you can watch your kids, and you always look at lunch, let's say, you're catching it at a certain moment. And the thing that's really challenging about analytics is that you're really trying to create a whole picture. And so I'm trying very hard not to focus on what I'm looking at this minute, because we've been, it's changed and changed and changed. So what I would encourage you to do about analytics as you're building is try to think of the broadest needs and then certain granular needs you might have.
except you kind of have to know what you want to get to build them is the only, you do have to know sort of where you're going. And I will tell you the other thing about our analytics that aren't that interesting as a whole right now is because it was a new space, because we have so much testing going on and people coming to visit that are that it's throwing things off because we're all looking at it in ways that are different. And then that little coding issue where we were self-making our own, favoriting, so that kind of messed up a lot of the analytics that we didn't fix till August. So all those wall, analytics are going to be all skewed. So your first year of something this big also doesn't give you, if it's really this big, it's not, like, I think with the phone we're going to get real analytics, pretty soon after after it starts.
It's scale, too.
With that
Right.
issue with the wall, it didn't just skew the wall, it also skewed
Skews
art
our
lens.
lens.
Because anyone that pulled anything off of the wall onto
On-
art lens
was-
was getting a limited, so it was like, you sort of realize it becomes a snowball thing. Where you're
Right.
like, whoa.
So the first year of analytics, so that we didn't have them is a little like, but at the same time, they're not going to tell us, there's a lot of faults to it in this first year.
Yeah. How about over here, and then we'll just keep going back and forth. And I'm sorry, if you have a hand in the back, you're going to have to raise it really high. How about here? I'm sorry, I can't see your name tag. I'm just pointing at you. Okay.
The hardware issues, you say you're not tied to technology, but you are tied to the hardware you have on the wall. How long is that hardware going to last before it?
The microtiles?
So how long, the question is, how long will the hardware last?
When are you going to start pulling them down and put up retinal screens, for example? Our screens are getting...
Are you offering?
No. But, in the next year, Apple is going to be, delivering larger retinal displays that are amazingly sharp, sharper than, they've gone through 5 iPads in the last 2.5 years. And that screen is going to get pretty sharp with a higher bit depth.
And without smudge.
When are you going to be pulling this stuff down? Have you
Yeah.
amortized the length of that?
So when I had to go and fight for the microtile wall, I had to give a legitimate, they're like, well, was it be a 10-year, and I was like, no. I said, we have to think about this truly as 5 years max, but I would say that we're already going to be, and I do think with all those other things coming out, though, the microtiles, they don't have that smudge. I really like, so many canons do it, and when you do it on the lenses, those we have to clean a lot more, and there's a lot more smudge stuff, and also I think it's going to be a lot more motion centered. I don't think people are going to be touching. It's all going to change, so that's why we put a lot more energy into the back end. But I would say to get the wall, I said 5 years max, but 4 years we were going to probably want to.
Start ripping it out.
Well, thinking about how is this really helping us? How could we, it was not for nothing in that space for, and as I even said, those 6 lenses, the hole in the floor is so tiny because we knew after 3 years, we might take those out. Even though we spent all this energy and all this time and we learned a lot, we are not planning on just using those and making a new set of interactive games.
And that's our Marcel Breuer historical 1970 wing. So, I mean, you know, we have to be flexible. You just have to be.
So 5, 6 years. Just to add on to that, you shot 45,000 objects. You shot the entire collection.
Howard did.
Howard did. He's right
45,000
behind you.
Is it? 45,000 objects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, were those shot with the lens in mind, or the
No,
2 or
so
3
with the
generations
with
of monitors?
No, with the whole building project, and I kind of wrote about digitizing the whole collection, but with the whole building project, they were doing this whole, I mean, they've been digitized, we've been ahead on digitizing the collection for a while, but at the level we wanted. And then they had, as everything went off view, because the building was being closed, things were photographed, and as certain things go on view, they are photographed. So they had a whole, when I saw that when I first came, I was like, we need to exploit this, because it's beautiful, all the images. So that was part of why we were going to pull from our back-end systems, because we were ahead of the game on this. And that was important to the institution for our online collection. We were working a lot with that and getting out the images. That's where it came from, was getting our entire collection online at a quality level.
Do you have anything you want to add,
How
Howard?
long did that take? 45,000 objects?
Well, about 10, 12 years.
But you've got, no, that's a reiteration,
So we announced our building project in 2001. And so we've been
That's
in,
about the time we went full digital.
Yeah.
and started, systematically photographing through the entire collection.
and we're going to open our Lost Wing January 2nd of 2014. So it gives you a sense of the
The
timeline.
confusion is, this is a third round of, many objects have been reshot at another level. It's, the idea of digitizing the collection took that long, but at the quality level we were at, it's been during the building project. So they keep getting, same thing with equipment, which is scary. We have to keep getting more equipment to get a different level, and what level. We have a rule at our institution that there was a decision made that you couldn't have images of different quality up on our online collection. If we didn't have an image shot at the same level, it couldn't be up. So we have nothing instead of something sometimes, although now we're kind of caught up almost with everything.
Keeps Howard busy.
Well, it is, it's kind of like mowing the grass on a really large estate. As soon as you're done, you start, yeah.
It's a good analogy.
But we're constantly rephotographing objects as need be. But we actually haven't finished photographing the entire collection yet. We're finishing the last 10%. Those are a lot of the parts of the collection that have been in storage and off display. Those areas of the collection that don't get that much attention. So it will be done very soon. A lot of the process, the problem with it is the handling of the optics. It's not just, when we first started the building project, there was some comments that we might take this opportunity to, when the original building in 1916, but when those objects went off the wheel and went into storage, so that building could be redone and they could add on the other parts of the building, but we would take that opportunity to, as those objects went to storage, they would be photographed. Well, that doesn't really work, because you can't have them going down the hallway on their way to storage and have a camera stuff just click. It's very time intensive process to light and photograph the objects properly, detail it to the amount of well, curatorial interest.
And the other thing that kept Howard busy is, for this project, the great thing is you have it online, you're not looking at every object that closely. You have it on this wall and you have it on the iPad, and so the great thing was we were able to scrub data, like titles that were not quite right, and images that were squashed and things like that, and reshoot them so that everything looked perfect. So we took him off schedule a little bit when we found something, so that anything on view would always look perfect.
And we also, we prioritized those artworks that are on view. So that helped us as well. I mean, we have 45,000 objects, but not 45,000 are on view. Was there a question over here? I'm sorry, Howard, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for instance, it would be good to just go through various parts of the collection and get a photographic studio lighting setup set up for one particular type of object and go through that entire part of the collection. That too.
We didn't have that luxury.
We didn't have that much.
But we've done that through grants. We've actually gone through our collection systematically, particularly because we have a really large photography collection. We can do that sort of thing where you just set up a person that's involved and do all the things with a grant.
I think I was over here in the gray sweater, I'm sorry.
I had a question about what benchmarks you set yourself when you first start the project planning. So when you say something was really successful, is it really successful against benchmarks that you set, or just compared to other things in the same gallery? And do you think you're going to be setting new benchmarks for the future based on what's happened in the first year? So in other words, you're going to kind of almost throw away your original benchmarks, because I know benchmarking for a completely new thing is extremely difficult. So I was wondering.
So we did put up those goals, and I think those are kind of in line with a lot of our benchmarks. And one of our big...
In terms of like how many people actually visited it, and
We didn't do visitation, we said an increase in visitorship. And the reason that we did that is because...
But that could be just one more person. I mean.
No, I know. The reason that we did that is because our space was also... The problem is that the thing that we didn't talk about is we were in the middle of a massive renovation. And so the problem we had is that we didn't have a baseline before we opened. Because we kept going through that. And we do have other concrete benchmarks, and you'll notice I'm not being very specific, because we're working on the evaluation. But we did have some, and yes, I think that they will change quite a lot, because it's not going to be a new space in a new building. It's going to be completely different.
Yeah, that's why I feel like second year we'll be able to look at things a lot closer, because anecdotally, I think I'm just surprised at some of the things we talked about conceptually, we see people doing. You know, because sometimes you have all these idea, and if we do this, if we lower it, people might look at the artwork, right? You know, and do people do that? And when you see it really happening, but there's actually just been a huge anecdotal enthusiasm. People come and they keep bringing back their aunt and their kids and their neighbors, and I mean, if someone's visiting in town, they want to show it off. So there is this like real positive, like, you know, they really enjoy it at that level. But I mean, but it's, as you said, there's no real. We are going to have 99,000 this year.
Well, I think that the thing that's also challenging for us is that exhibitions we have a clicker, we have a person who counts the people who goes in. This is a free space, people flow in and flow out. We're a free institution, we don't have tickets. And so it adds a little bit of complexity, and that's also why it's been challenging for our evaluators. We really don't know how many people went into the space. We have to sort of gauge it based on attendance to the building.
Right,
So
and
that
an
adds some
assumption, like,
context.
I don't actually even maybe agree with it, you know, so. Because, I mean, it's totally on assumptions, and so we actually are looking into sort of sensor cameras to really, that really do a real great job of counting individuals and not recounting them, and so that we get real numbers in the museum.
And we have 2 entrances. And so it makes it very complex. When we were planning the space and we're thinking about benchmarks, we actually, I guess we have 3 entrances. That we were, one of the things that one of our early evaluators, Marianne Adams, said is, we said, do you think people will come in this door or this door? She's like, yes. I mean, that's true. People turn right or left? Yes. And so that adds so much complexity to the project in terms of thinking about who's doing it, who's using it, when are they coming in, who are they? So there's a lot of complexity. I think there was a question over here? Over in the back, I'm sorry, I said to her next. Yes, you. I don't know, I'm sorry. Nobody has named, I can't, just calling everyone, pointing at people.
I'm just saying, this is obviously incredibly innovative and successful for your visitors and with the museum, the broader profession. I'm just wondering if you think there's anything special about your museum and the teams you have, or your directors, that has allowed you to be so successful with this.
So I have the dubious honor of being the person who's the longest standing member of the team. I started as an intern with the very first iteration of this, and I've been there for 13 years. And we've had at least 6 different heads of leadership. We've had numerous people who've come in and out of the team. But I think, I mean, I don't know, right? Because I'm in it. So that's like asking me, like, are my kids the best, are my kids the best kids ever? Well, yes, of course they are. But, like, so it's very hard to say that. But one thing I will say is that I think that any of us who work in museums, we're all incredibly driven, tenacious. We believe in what we're doing. And so the one thing that our institution did was that they believed in us too. And we had a donor who was really tenacious and kind of demanding in a good way. I mean, I think many of us have to work very closely with donors, and it can be challenging. This was not challenging. He challenged us in a good way. And so those are all positives.
And I would say, people ask me that question a lot when I give the tour, and I always say that one of the reasons I think we're special and that this was successful, beyond that passionate people and great workers, which I think most museums, I mean, that's why we're in museums, although we're the best, no. but that the museum really looked at it differently and how we collaborated. They really did look that all parts have to be involved at the beginning to the end. We did put an AV integrator at the very beginning, which really makes the implementation at the end. You're not trying to retrofit things. We knew it was working. We have a world-class collection, and actually Tom Campbell from the Met was there, and he said, I love the wall. He goes, but really what makes this work is that you guys have a great collection. That's what that makes it special. And then also we did really look at not doing one-off kiosks. We really did look at, we have a digitized collection, and we pull from our systems, and we look at, and so that all the information can be used in multiple ways. And we're at a point where we can start thinking creatively of whatever the next new device is. We've sort of put the groundwork into how would that work. So I do think that's what made this able to do and a little bit special. And
I think it's that we have a great collection, but we also decided to pick great things from our collection. So, I mean, any institution, if they decide that they're going to take out something from, take out their showcase piece from a gallery and put it in a space like this, that shows balls. I mean, that's really pretty impressive, right? That you're like, hey, take the Picasso out of the room that people are expecting to see it in. Here somewhere? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess sort of picking up on the last point about this creativity and innovation from what you're learning. What I'm wondering about is sort of how that's influencing your thinking going forward, and I guess particularly on the data side, because to pull off something that big with that many uses of the data, and then we sit around in this conference and listen to people talk about, and we're trying to re-architect, refactor, extend, share, etc. There's so many aspirations. You're about to undertake a major re-architecting of backends. How has this influenced the way you all think about the data that you hold?
We're actually, not to give a little, but we are doing a little talk, I think tomorrow. The whole application team is here, because every project they're working on now has to tie into this big picture. And it can't easily be done. I mean, there's one person who spent a long time on just, our purchasing software. When people buy something, development has no idea. If you buy a membership, we have multiple names in the development database, and so how does having a central table that can talk to many different things was it's not a sexy project, but that project is helping, like the part of just scanning the iPads that was implemented into that easily. So we just think, the team just thinks that way. And when there is a new project, people get excited, but we actually had a brand new website that we migrated from Sitecore to open source, to Drupal, so that we could search more easily, we could use the data better, and do many different things with that, and bring it into even like how we have today's events could be brought into the app in an easy way, which we couldn't do with a CMS, with a Sitecore CMS. So we just can't, we have a ton of things we want to do and you can't do them, and so our rule was sort of like, take the things that affect the most and just get those done, and we just keep going, and certain things still are their standalones and they're frustrating, and we feel for the departments that are, that hate it, but we just look at that picture, and we continue to do, but we're not starting from scratch, so you have to keep putting the Band-Aids in places, and And I just, even like with the app we're constantly fixing, I just told the team today, like, we've made this big fix, and of course now something else shifted that, you know, so it's always makes life, you know.
Everyone just excited. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.